So the first thing we'll look at is just GERCon. And so I've heard of this conference, for a lot of years, but I never went. And then I had the opportunity to volunteer for Hacker for Kids my first year. And so I got to the conference for free, right? I just been able to volunteer with the children. It was an excellent conference. And so something to think about when we look at conferences that are close by. So these are one of the things that kind of keep on your radar for the upcoming year. And then on top of the GERCon, and I'll let Dave kind of explain some more. I'll put him on the spot. He does something called Hacker for Kids. So I did it at GERCon for the first time, helped participate, great experience. And then we hosted one virtually, and I was the facilitator. And it was definitely excellent experience. And these are for children to get them involved into cybersecurity. So Dave is like the guy. He's the point guy for the Hacker for Kids. He's my point guy from GERCon as well. So if you ever think about as far as volunteering, giving back, and trying to partake information, Hacker for Kids is definitely a good idea, a good thing to do. And then also GERCon as well, as far as something that's in this Midwest, or if you're in Chicago, Midwest area as well. So, Dave, if you want to say anything about GERCon or Hacker for Kids, the floor is yours for now.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing it up. I mean, I just was wearing the shirt. I didn't expect it to become a plug for two of my most favorite conferences. I love GERCon because it's just a down-to-earth, no divas, great talks, whether you're in like, hey, I care about InfoSec and I just kind of want to learn more about GRC. Okay, there's a whole series and a track for you. Or if you're like, nope, I like to get into CLI, I like to compile code, I like to decompile code, there's a whole nother hacker track for you. And then there's also another track for new speakers. There's an executive summit if you're an executive and you want to just kind of sit down with executives for a day, kind of talk about what's important to you there. Great speakers like Dave Kennedy and Kevin Johnson, Jason Street, those guys. And then the badge this year was pretty cool, so I'm going to plug that. So I actually was electronics badge designer this year. So just like the shirt, it was a skull. It's also a little reflective. You can see a little light reflecting. Arduino chip. So basically a skull-shaped Arduino with some blinky lights. Pretty cool, pretty fun. But great event. And then Hack for Kids is something started back in 2014 for kids ages 7 to 17. It's an in-person event that started in Chicago. And then we kind of branched out to being like a village at other conferences, like GERCon and other places. And it's just like Otha pretty much said everything about it. But it's not just like, hey, let's open up a terminal, let's fire up Kali, let's get into Metasploit. There is things related to electronics. There's things in there related to just writing code. But at a kid's level, we actually took all the disciplines of those plus lockpicking and created a hacker escape room for the kids. They had to like apply all those skills. Pretty cool stuff. Talks, prizes. There's a CTF. The more stuff they do at the event, the greater the chance they have to win. Yep, there's all the cool stuff in the workshops. So it's been pretty quiet lately, and the only way that we can actually do anything with the kids was virtually. So we had 3 cyber defense clinics, and Otha was gracious enough to lead one of them. So thanks again for that, Otha. Any questions?
Where can I sign up to volunteer?
Well, I'd have to find, like, we do a little bit of a background check on people. It's not like, NSA level, but it's more like we just want to make sure all the volunteers have been vetted. So if you want to email questions at Hack for Kids, HAK4KIDZ is the domain. You'll actually email me and we could take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that. Thanks.
Awesome. Welcome.
Yep.
Any other question? And if you wish to donate, there's always a donate button on the page. We're a charity, 501c3. The only way we make money is through the kindness of people. Or I, like, for example, do projects like this and I made an extra 100 with Gurkon's permission to sell at DEF CON. So this way that becomes like a little fundraiser for hacker kids.
And one of the things I wanted Dave to talk about was the simple fact that, you know, we've been on this resume interview track for the last 3 sessions, and we finally put the nail in the coffin for that. But we talked about networking, right? And part of that, getting that cyber, for those who are trying to break into the field, you know, networking is key, trying to get that cyber IT job. When Dave said that he was going to come to the meeting, I already knew in my mind I was going to have him talk about the stuff, but I didn't tell him. But when he had the shirt, it was kind of a great segue in. And we talked about when you're in that interview process, you know, trying to establish a relationship with the person that you're dealing with, right? And I think those things are key, because once you start establishing a relationship or having a rapport with someone, then the floodgates open. So going to GERCON, participating in Hacker for Kids, even if you do it once for the experience, you will meet somebody. To give an example, there's this organization, and I'm going to put Nick on the spot, called Trace Labs. And Trace Labs is dealing with OSINT, and it's about finding missing people. Very cool concept. Signed up for it. And I always wonder, well, how do I do that? You know, how do I find people? How do I, you know, and I didn't know this site was pretty popular. Right. And I did research on the guys and everything. And I figured, oh, these guys are pretty good. It's a very good idea to try to find people through social media. They even teach a class. I think Ernest was actually one of the classes as well. But it was all based upon just trying to do a search on. And I think Nick and I had a conversation, I guess his rep. We talked about Trace Labs. And after we talked about Trace Labs, he started treating me a little bit different. And that was because
listen, just because I thought you were trying to sell me at every possible avenue until you started treating me like a real human being.
Right. But he's absolutely right. So once you start talking about something, and I hate to always push Cisco to sound like they use car salesmen, but once we start talking about Trace Lab and talking about what they represent, and then he started talking about, oh, I know a guy who's won the CTF, and he's been in, and I started going to that guy's training. The floodgates open up, right? Because it's establishing that relationship. So I say that to say, if we were in an interview and he was interviewing me for a position and I started talking about Trace Labs, then I would have immediately established a relationship with him, or rapport. And now that conversation would have gone differently, right? Versus, okay, let me quiz him on this. Oh, he's in to Trace Labs. So he has to have a passion for finding missing people, and he must know OSINT to a degree. Now, in addition to that, Nick has something called Operation Safe Escape.
You're going to call me out like this, aren't you?
No, first was Dave and now it's you. This is just kind of adding on to that Trace Labs mentality as far as, okay, how do I, and you see it in the tagline, security professionals helping vulnerable population escape abuse and harassment. So those individuals that are looking for, I need to put something on my resume that highlights my security background, or that I'm working in the security field, participating in a Trace Labs CTF, or one of the contests that they have, and put you, even if you don't even win, as long as you place, or even if you don't place, that's something to add to your resume to show people that at least how, what I call threat hunting. The Safe Escape is another opportunity to enhance that by volunteering as well. Because people in the IT field, security field, they want to see people who do things that are outside of the box. And then not only that, but it's also networking. Networking to the point where people will give you little hints about certain jobs or whatever. And so those are things that you need to think about, because although, there's a good InfoSec community, the community is kind of small. And because it's small, everyone knows one another. You have the opportunity to use that as a leverage, particularly when you volunteer. Okay. Nick, if you want to add anything, definitely I'll give you the soapbox.
Yeah, just a quick plug. I've been with OSE, or Operation Safe Escape, for I think it's almost coming on 2 years now. I've been through a wide range of their teams, and currently right now I sit as the interim chief of operations. So I do know the organization very well. I do live and breathe this organization pretty much every single day. I would say coming to an organization like this, the most common question I get asked is, do you feel intimidated by working in this group? And I absolutely don't. This is one of the most down to earth groups I think I've ever attached myself to. The people that we work with on day to day, they're definitely hurting. There's a wide range. We call them in this industry survivors, but there's a wide range of people that you get to interact with and potentially help. We don't necessarily focus on the cybersec stuff only, but we focus on kind of the main mission, even the header of how do we make people safe. So we do work, a wide range between, not that I want to highlight this, but trafficking situations, drug cartels, all the way down to domestic abuse. It's an absolutely thing that's very near and dear to my heart, and I cannot say enough about this organization. I will tell you that we are a smaller volunteer organization, so sometimes it's a little sluggish trying to get things moving. But if you do have any issues or you want to volunteer, I threw it's info@safeescape.org, or you can contact me directly at nick.l@safeescape.org. You don't necessarily have to be, working with survivors directly. We have tons of other stuff that you can do, content creation, just helping out, just sitting in the background. I can tell you that I sat in the background for a good 6 months before I got kind of more involved, where I kind of said like, hey, I don't know what to do. And someone stuffed me into what they call intake. So I've actually been the voice in the front for a lot of folks that actually come in from volunteers all the way up into survivors. And I can tell you it is one of the most amazing things I've done in my life. It was my background, and again, I know this is not really about me, but my background, I actually come from the medical field. So I worked in an ambulance for a good chunk of my adult life. I've worked in surgery centers, and that was my way of giving back. And, to Otha's point about Trace Labs, I started there. And then one of the people that was heavily involved in Trace Labs, Joe Gray, dragged me into Operation Safe Escape, and I haven't left since. But it's an awesome organization. Like I said, great people. If you want to learn on kind of the social service side, it's a good place to apply some of your skills, and you do not have to be an expert. And just as everything else, like even in Otha's course here, or the seminars that we go through each week, we have a wide breadth of people, all the way from 3-letter agencies to professionals that work in OSINT, law enforcement, even, criminal backgrounds, that kind of stuff, lawyers. So if there's stuff that you wanted to learn on, it's another opportunity to actually do that. But like I said, I don't mean, I'll get off the soapbox, I promise. I just love this organization though, but hit me up if you want to learn more, or if you just want to get, kind of in the fold a little bit and meet some people, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And I know normally we don't start off like this, but I do want to highlight some things because, like I say, being able to volunteer, being able to enhance your skill set, put something on your resume is very key. So we're going to get started, and we've been talking about OWASP, Juicebox, right? So I'm going to open up a terminal, and we're going to get started. All right. So we put everything in a Docker, right? So just to kind of start off, so we have our version of Kali Linux, right? Kali Linux is running in VMware. We're just going to talk about the lab setup real quick, and then we're going to get into it. And then in the Kali Linux, my host operating system, we have VirtualBox, but in Kali Linux, we have the Docker engine already running, right? And in this Docker engine, which is the container runtime environment that we're using, happen to be Docker, right? And in that Docker container that we're going to actually use is OWASP Juicebox. All right, so I'm just going to call it OJ for Juicebox, right? And so what we're going to do, I have my network adapters bridge for my VirtualBox. So everything in my VirtualBox will have that particular or in that same network. And we'll get into probably the Docker orchestration and things of that nature, but Rick did an excellent job on that in the past. We had the video posted. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can use that and have that as kind of your background. But what we basically going to do now is we're going to spin up the OWASP Juicebox website URL. And then what we're going to do is go through the top 10. Now, the top 10, we won't do a deep dive in all of the top 10, but we want to give each individual enough to understand as they go into an interview the different various attacks. And then once we start looking at the website in general, and we may do this intertwined, we're going to start looking at, okay, well, what about the container host? How do we actually protect that? How do we protect the host? And then how do we protect the Docker daemon as well to prevent attacks to it? So we have the host, we have the daemon, the host, because all these are possible targets. So we're going to narrow down the targets and narrow down the variables, look at the OWASP top 10, and then hopefully be done with it. So I don't know how long it's going to take as far as months. I'm not a web app pen tester, but there are a lot of other individuals on this call that are probably better than I am. So I'm going to be putting them on the spot and calling on them to actually assist as well. So that's it in a nutshell. So we should have the Docker running in Kali Linux. The version of Kali Linux that I'm running is like 2.21.2, I think. Right, but it doesn't really matter what version of Kali as long as you're not using Backtrack or something that's old and out of date. So with that being said, I'm going to pull up, I'll start my Docker, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do, so remember with Kali Linux, they used to do the root and Tor. So now you have to, and I didn't make another user, so I'm using just the Kali user. But you always want to make sure that you want to use the sudo to be able to run the commands, because if you don't, and if you get this error message, you don't have the permission. So anytime when you're in Kali Linux and it says that you don't have the permissions, you need to be running, or you need to use the sudo command. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm doing sudo, and one more thing I'm going to show you is that so it's building the app, it's building all the dependencies. And I didn't want to, I could have ran it in the background with the -d command, but I didn't because I wanted everybody to actually see what was happening themselves. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my web browser. I already know what port I'm running it on. I'm running on port 3000, and it's already up and running. Okay, so this is it. This is the website. Okay, now when you start looking at web app pen testing, and so remember, we want to deal with stuff in the cloud, but every web app is actually running in a cloud. So you want to be able to hack the web app, but then you also want to be able to infiltrate or hack the cloud infrastructure as well. So it's a lot easier to kind of go through the web portion first. And then as we progress in the class on the user groups, we'll start looking at the infrastructure in itself, you know, the containers and things of that nature. One of the things that we're going to do also is that because a lot of people are familiar with Docker, but when they go to AWS, you hear the term Kubernetes, right? Which is kind of a management platform for containers. And so we'll probably look at installing Kubernetes on Linux and Kali Linux, actually walk through it so you can actually see what it takes to install that. So this is basically a web page. And when you look at the web page, the first thing you can do is look at the source code.
Wait, I
And
thought that was illegal.
it depends upon who you ask, right? But you will always want to, when you start doing your web app, you want to get familiar with the web page as much as possible, right? And looking at the source code, right, is, and to give you an idea of what's out there. And you don't have to be an HTML genius, right? But what you want to do is kind of look for keywords, password, admin, login, things of that nature. And even if you don't know or you don't see it, that's fine. But you want to at least get in the habit of saying, okay, let me kind of go through and see what else I see. Maybe can provide me with some extra information that later on down the line, I can figure out or know what I'm talking about. Right. So I'm just looking at, the links, HTML, the header, the meta stuff, content message, source, something about YouTube. See something about script.
You can try and click into those too, Otha, the .js scripts. They might have stuff inside those JS scripts too.
Yep. Good suggestion. Function return. Let's go back. And the thing you want to think about is that although you may not be an HTML developer or PHP or whatever the case may be, or JavaScript, every engagement or every assignment, everything's a learning experience, right? So usually what I do when I'm trying to learn something, I'll be taking notes, right? To figure out, okay, well, what does this mean? And then you can go down a rabbit hole relatively quickly, but at least gives you an idea of, okay, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. Let me try to go down the next one. And this is how you learn, just by being curious, trying to see what's out there, and going for broke. All right. So I didn't see anything that stood out for me because I'm not an HTML guru or whatnot. Um, so I'm like, you know what? Okay, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't see a lot of stuff. I don't see a password. I don't see login. Nick said we can click on this stuff, and now this just looks like Ghibli Goo, right? And that's a new technical term. But it's a learning experience, right? Let me click through all of them just in case something pops up. Now, ideally, sometimes when you're doing web pen testing, um, all the links to a website, you want to go through them, or have a tool that will automate the process of going through stuff, right? All fair consent. All right. So I'm going to go back to the home page. I'm going to click on this. Free open source. And I know sometimes when we look at Mr. Robot and things of that nature, we say, oh, he's doing the cool stuff. But we don't see the stuff that is the boring stuff. So now I have an email address that I can possibly email somebody. So I'll write that down. Maybe I can do some sort of phishing attack. Who knows? Go to this one. So this is the admin. Copy that. And typically when you look at it, something has the admin. So usually see something like info at Juice Shop or info or contact at. You don't see, oh, this is the admin of the actual website. So definitely want to use that for possible phishing.
Is it okay to inject?
Sure, go ahead.
Derek? Well, it also revealed what the domain is for this particular environment. Because when you're going here to the straight up IP, we don't know what the domain is, but we just saw that it was juice-sp.op. So that was also another valuable hint clue, especially login page, because now you could try brute forcing that password, right? Because now you know the username. Distracted. Another guest speaker.
Someone wants to know is it time for bed. So that's definitely a good point, Dave, about the domain name, the admin user, and what you're doing. You're just collecting pieces of information, and these pieces of information, is like pieces of the puzzle, right? All right, we're gonna go down, look at the banana juice reviews, another email address. And you guys see the pattern, right? Going through looking at this is Stan Bender again. And when you think about compromising websites, there's two things to think about. So I want to compromise the website where I can do some sort of, file directory traversal. I want to actually hack the website. And then you get to the point where I want to hack the people that are actually coming to the website, the client, the end users. And so typically when you think about hacking people that are coming to the website, you're thinking about using something like using JavaScript to enable a website to compromise the end user that's actually going to it, right? Or when I want to hack the website, I want to be able to put a malicious file on a particular website. So now individual users that come to that particular website, they would download that compromised file. And it works. I had a customer that had data sheets for their products, and their data sheet had malicious macros in it. And so it got to the point where if I downloaded that, I bought the product, my computer was potentially compromised with malware. Is that company liable for infecting my machine? Now you get into this whole legal argument, right? If that customer that was downloaded that data sheet and their machine got infected with malware, let's say it's ransomware, and it just attacked the entire environment, and the ransomware wanted, $100 million, and then they paid $100 million, right? The insurance company is going to say, well, how did it start? They do the investigation, and they may say, oh, we're not liable for it. The payoff, the company that was hosting the malicious malware, the data sheet, maybe they're liable for it, and then they go after that company. So the whole legal argument comes into play when you have websites and who's legal responsible for that content. Okay. So I'm not going to go through and each one, although I should, but I have enough names. So if I wanted to do a phishing attack or some sort of social engineering, I can do that. Right. Now, let's say, for example, going back to the domain, right? So we know the domain is this OWASP, this juice.sh.op, right? Now, what you could possibly do is figure out, well, what are the subdomains for this particular website or this particular company? Now, since this is not a real company, right? I'm going to do DNS Dumpster. All right. And we've probably talked about this before. And with this DNS Dumpster, I'm going to put in a domain, right? So we know that this domain is basically juiceshop.op, but this is just software that we can actually use. It's not a realistic domain. But just to show you the power of this, I'm just going to put in Cisco.com.
So you could use Hack for Kids if you want.
It may be Hack for Kids won't provide me as much stuff as Cisco, right?
I definitely won't.
But we'll do Hack for Kids, but we'll do Cisco as well. So the thing about like the DNS dumps is the fact that as you scroll down, you see all the domains based upon DNS for Cisco systems. If you keep scrolling down, I can download it in an Excel spreadsheet. I see this nice little graph here, but I can also see view the graph. This is something beta, but this graph is a little bit more interactive, right? I can enlarge it. Click on it, so there's a lot more that I can actually do with it, right? But it's so many, it's hard to read, all right? But you get the point that from this, I can start looking at subdomains. I'm trying to find subdomains to go after, okay? So let's do Hack for Kids. And it's HAKZ, right?
HAK4KIDZ.
Or KIDZ.
Yeah.
.org.
COM.
Okay. So you're looking at the DNS servers. Here's the MX records. And if you don't know what MX records are, these are where the emails for the domain goes. So you get a lot of good information, right? Here's another domain, CTF Hack for Kids. Let's do this. And this is the graph, right? Click on the beta graph. Just views it in a different way. But you can move these boxes around. Okay. So this is the power of being able to track that DNS. Okay. Now, another thing as well, when you start looking at websites, when Google goes out and spiders the internet and looks at the different directory paths for that particular website, right? You want to make sure that Google doesn't find the sensitive information and put it out there. So they use something called a robots.txt file that will actually tell Google, look, don't use these particular sites or don't use these directory paths. Now you can look at the robot.txt file and say, okay, if these are the things that you don't want Google to spider or find, then they must be of importance. So you can put that in your list as well. Okay. And we'll take a look at that in a second. But you want to be able to find multiple domains because you're thinking about what's your target. I'll need to find the domain and then even subdomains underneath it. Because as I'm building out my little cheat sheet, right? Let's imagine we'll use the domain BDPA for a second. For example, bdpa.org. Now, somebody may have a development environment or even a staging environment before they actually go to production. So these are some of the things you want to look at: a development environment, a staging environment, and then a full production. Okay. Now your production environment would be bdpa.org, right? Typically your development environment, depending upon who's doing the coding in your environment, would typically be www.dev.bdpa.org. Okay. And then outside of that, your staging environment, if they do have a staging environment, because some people don't, or it may be stg.bdpa.org.
You can add QA.
Yep, they may have a QA environment. And then the production environment is this as well. Now, depending upon the company that you work for, the QA and the staging environment may all be in a development environment. Or if they have a good team, they have a good life cycle as far as deployment of code for a website, then they may have all three. Okay, but these are what people look for: dev, staging, QA, and sometimes you may find something that says prod, that BDPA or something like that, and that would be kind of that QA environment. It's like post production or something. So, but basically, a lot of people look for this dev, and hopefully, developers don't call it dev. Hopefully, they call it BDPA. But the thing about it, you start getting the issues with certificates and things of that nature. You know, but something to think about. And usually, when you have a dev environment, depending upon how they set it up, it won't be HTTPS. It's going to be HTTP, because sometimes they may go the cheap route. And for all of these, for the staging, they may have a certificate to do HTTPS, but for the dev, they may not. And when you think about it, if I want to hack this website, the production website, and if I find a development website, then I'm going to play around with the development website, learn the ins and outs of it. So now when I do my attack against BDPA.org, the production website, I know what attacks to use.
Hey, Otha, can I jump in here for 2 seconds?
Sure, definitely.
Just one quick tip too. If you are, obviously, we don't want to attack things illegally. So we're going to assume that you have permission to do whatever you're doing. But another thing too, a lot of the larger companies, Fortune 50, 100, 500, all the way down, they use what's called a CDN, or they use a backend like Akamai or like Cloudflare or something like that. You will get flagged if you don't protect your WAN IP. So I want to make it apparently clear too, just as a good habit for your own OPSEC, so you don't ruin your own internet experience like I've done repeatedly from doing pen testing. But use some type of a VPN or use a proxy that you set up yourself. There's easy ways to do it in AWS. You can do it in DigitalOcean. You can use the Streisand proxy, but use something that protects your actual IP address, because even though you have permission to attack like BDPA.org, you want to make sure that you still have the ability to keep what you need at home running. But it's just it's one of those tips that it took me a long time to kind of figure out.
Yep, that's a good point, Nick. And even if you're doing it for your company, right, you want to make the attack as realistic as possible from a red teaming, pen testing perspective. That way, when the blue team or purple team sees that IP address, they want, oh, that's Nick, that's Otha, that's Dave, Rasul, Al. We see that IP address all the time. It's from Comcast or Xfinity. You want to make sure that, okay, let me bounce off or use, and we've talked about using Tor in the past, to say, okay, let me use a Tor network based out of, Turkey or something, some obscure country. That way, if you are doing a red teaming exercise, you want to see if your blue team, purple team, green team, whatever they call it these days, can actually identify that IP address, right? To see if it gets flagged, to see if they're on their P's and Q's as well. Okay. No, but good point. So I have all these things up and running, right? I have a website that I want to hack. I have it. So now I need to get to the point, well, I got a domain, what I'm going to do with it, right? And so the next thing to kind of look at is Nmap. And with Nmap will tell you what ports are open. Okay? And remember, every port is a number which is mapped to an application. So when I run Nmap, I can see what application is actually running on that particular hosted machine. Now, there's another website called Built With. If I can spell, I think it's Build With or Built With. There you go. So I can put in a domain name, IP address, and it'll tell me what that website is built with. And then there's another one called Netcraft as well. So with Netcraft, you have the capability, and then one of my favorites is openbugbounty.org. And I'm misspelling everything today. Okay. Now, the cool thing about Open Bug Bounty is that it will list vulnerabilities that have gone through the official patching disclosure, right? So I was with a customer, and we just put it in. Because everything is patched. So you see it says domain, researcher, date, this is patched. If you put a domain in, it's going to say unpatched. And they give you type cross-site scripting. So this lets me know, okay, something dealing with JavaScript. I can click on it. It'll take me to the actual report. Cross-site scripting, which is part of the OWASP top 10. And they give you the vulnerable URL. And it gives you the disclosure timeline. Right. So reported 2016, roughly what, a year later, it was fixed. So an entire year they were going by. Right. So they told the company in July and then publicly disclosed it August the 2nd. And then August 29th, a year later, is fixed. Okay. So do you guys see the problem with that? It took them a year to fix it. Although it was reported to them, you know, in 2006, and company after company, this happens to them, right? Because you don't know what the developers are doing. So openbugbounty.org, Netcraft, built with, we're just going to put in so now it's going to give you, you know, the technology profile. And you don't have to know what half this stuff is, right? This is your learning opportunity to drill down and figure out, okay, what is this stuff? What is App Dynamics? What's Rapleaf, ClickTail, Path Factory? You know, what is all this stuff? You know, we talked about CDN with Akamai. There's a Akamai Impulse. What is that? Right? So, but now you start looking at, okay, these are different websites. I have an understanding of what they are built with. And then now you can figure out, well, what are some of the vulnerabilities for the things that are actually built with? And then here, I'm going to go back up, detailed technology profile. So now you can say, okay, well, these things must cost money. These things must be free, you know, open source type of plugin. Right? I don't know, but these are the things that you can start targeting, right? So does it make sense?
The only other comment I'll throw in here is just be careful too, because some of these could be false positives. I know we're kind of going around the manual testing way, but I also suggest, and hopefully I'm not taking the thunder away from you too, Otha, but get some type of scanning tool up while you're doing what Otha is doing. The reason being, like, you can have NetSparker or OWASP Zap, you know, doing a lot of this research for you. Because even though you might find a vulnerability for, like, for example, I don't know, Crux Digital, it's just the first thing I looked at, it might not work on the site because the site just doesn't accept commands or whatever else because it's running through Akamai. So you want to get kind of a holistic experience too. And I'm the first person to admit that I'm guilty of, I think I found something cool. I did the research, found the exploit, and I'm like, well, I ran it, but nothing works and it doesn't make sense. So just be cautious with doing recent. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing what Otha is doing. I'm just giving you another perspective from the opposite end. But make sure you collect all of it to get a full picture before you start down a path to where you might not get anything from it.
No, that was definitely helpful information, and we'll get into automated tools and things of that nature because that's going to make your job a lot easier. But sometimes when you use automated tools, you may not know what you're looking at, right? And when you do manual, you may not know what you're looking at, right? But I just wanted to get in the habit of, okay, let me manually dig through because sometimes some of these things will sink in a little bit better versus using an automated tool. But you're definitely right. The automated tool will do a lot of this stuff. I use something called Spiderfoot, which I love that product. It automates a lot of stuff, and I take that output and then I start diving down, hunting stuff that it flags for me. But I think being able to understand, some of the basics through manual processes is always good. Okay. Any more questions, comments, anything that that I may have missed? I know we have a host of experience on the video, so definitely chime in is definitely welcomed.
So if I can, Otha,
Yep, go ahead.
I know you was building a nice methodology. So you started off with what we would call the scope of the work. It's funny you doing this web stuff because I'm prepping the stuff for my meetup to start doing some web stuff too. So you giving me some, I can see some things here that's just popping in my mind that I was taking notes of. So what Otha was talking about when he was using the Juice Shop or Cisco.com, he's talking about what's considered in the scope of work. So when you're talking with your client, you decide on, you know, what you're going to do the work on. So the process that Otha was following when he said the domain and he started looking for subdomains, if it wasn't discussed in your initial meeting with your client, you would just go back and ask, hey, I found these subdomains. Are they in the scope of work? Are they okay, to be in the scope of the work? And then two, you pointed out just doing your information gathering phase, Otha, you pointed out like all of the good things to use to build with, the Netcraft toolbar. But going back to the regular Juice Shop site where you was clicking on, also as a part of that, you want to um, look at where you can input information in, wherever a user could click in on something. So you like that search, the logon field is one. You got that search box right there. Anywhere a user could input information in, you definitely want to make a note of that because those are also attack vectors.
Yep, and definitely um, a good point for that too. And Rasul hosts a Miami meetup group, and we'll put the information in the chat room as well. And Al, who has been helping out with my meetup group just to expand. Rasul is on Tuesdays. Al is on Thursdays. Rasul, as he mentioned, doing the web piece of it. We just wrapped up with the packet capture analysis, and Al is doing a series dealing with threat hunting. All right. So when you look at, and this is kind of a quick way to look for, how would I say, SQL injection is to say, okay, well, what type of input can I have, right? So you see, I just put a tick in. And we'll go down this further because injection is one of the things that the OWASP top 10, the SQL injections, the LDAP injections, the XPath injection. There's a bunch of stuff that we can go down the path. I haven't done any of those except SQL injection, and I'm not real good at that. But as we go down this path, I'll get better, and you guys will get better as well. But what he's talking about is just to expand on, when you are putting stuff in, you know, the password or even the search engine, you have to think about every website, right? This is your website, has a back-end connection to a database, usually. If it's a database for products, it's a database for usernames and identity, whatever the case may be, this front-end website is connected to something on the back end. And so with the injection part of it, particularly with the SQL injection, you want to be able to see if I can do a command, and this particular command, it could be select, and we get into the exact syntax, but let's say use some pseudocode, select name, right? So now I want to be able to select the name table on this particular database on the back end, right? And that's in the simplistic form, and we'll get into more detail later. So this is the advantage of, trying to figure out, well, what can I do for the input? What is the input validation? Does the guy on the back end know the input validation? Another thing too is just, okay, what about the password? If you click on forgetting your password, what does it do to authenticate you are that particular user to provide a new password? And a lot of this stuff you'll get into, like stealing cookies, session IDs, all this stuff. We'll get into it later. This is just kind of the precursor, just to look at the website, get familiar with it. Another thing too that you can do is there's this thing called the Wayback Machine. And so you can look at this same website, not OWASP Juicebox, but you look at a website in the Wayback Machine, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, because they may have a directory path or something that was done a month ago or 2 months ago that is a hidden directory, or gives you a little bit more information about how do you launch your attack for today. Okay. So the key takeaway is something Rasul was talking about, this input validation, that this website on the back end has a database or something. And you can get to the point where if it has SQL injection, and if you know SQL very well, I can delete this back end database. And I've heard stories of people having problems where they're in a production environment, or the production and development environment is still pulling from the same data. And a pen tester is doing, SQL injection, and he's trying to delete tables in the database to show the customer that, look, it's exploitable, and he's actually doing the real data, right? So that goes back to that scope of work and what you can and cannot do, because, can you imagine this? Somebody's doing a pen test for Amazon and delete the entire database, or Netflix. They delete all the database for all the new release movies, right? Somebody's going to have to make sure they have cyber insurance for that engagement, right? Or get fired. So the key attack vector is this database on the back end, but I'm going to use the front end to get to the back end. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. All right. So one of the things dealing with the OWASP juice box, and like I say, we'll get into more of the Docker stuff, and Rick did a beautiful job actually talking about this. But one of the things is they have a scoreboard, and the scoreboard is, you actually get a point for that. All right. So as you go down, you get to see the different levels, the categories, how difficult it is. A lot of stuff just to help enable you as you go down this path. Now, I know what you're thinking, what is sensitive data exposure? What is all this stuff? And you can go to, didn't want to go there. I want to go to the, and you see the mapping of it. You can actually see the categories as well. And it gives you an idea of what it actually is or what it actually does. Okay. And what I did, I started going down. She got a 10 going, yay. I started looking at what 2017 is, because I found a lot more people doing walkthroughs on that. And then I was trying to map it to 2021. Right. And this is just how I interpreted trying to learn this stuff. And then I get to the point, okay, well, what is this stuff? And then, okay, how to prevent it as well. So this one is called broken access control. User access data that is not intended for them, access hidden pages, elevate to administrative account, view other people's data. And then how to prevent it. And then cryptography failures. It used to be sensitive data exposure. Now I get what it is and how to prevent it. The injection piece. So I'm just going through it and learning all this stuff, right? And now everybody else may have a different method of how they do it, but this is how I'm putting my pieces in the puzzle and how I'm presenting to you. Because sometimes when, we get on these calls on Sundays or Tuesdays and Thursdays, you see us present information, but you don't know how we got to that particular point, right? And so I want to show you how I'm getting to this particular point, because the OWASP top 10, we're going on this path together, but how do you as an individual get there, right? So I'm just going down, filling in the gaps. And then as I go through the top 10, I'm just figuring out this stuff. I'll put this on a cheat sheet, and when I'm bored in a meeting or something, I'll just start looking at this stuff. And then, we'll look at a schedule every day. But, and I'll send out this spreadsheet. But the good thing about this is it's mapped to it, sensitive data exposure. It's good for demos and things of that nature. All right. So those are the things to think about. And I want to share something else with you guys right quick, because I don't want to look like that I know everything. But I want to.
I'll say when you finish that part, Otha, let Nick chime back in, because he's throwing some pretty decent stuff in the chat window. Yeah,
Okay.
but he not saying nothing. He's just dropping it in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go unnoticed here.
I see you, Nick.
Quit reading.
So this is something, and we'll make sure that we put all the chat stuff too when we post the video on YouTube, that it kind of walks through the juice shop, right? The vulnerability categories. It talks about this stuff, and all this stuff is relevant because it's going to help you understand it. And even if you don't know all 10, at least you want to know the top 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or top 5 to be able to explain it. Maybe the top 1 be able to demonstrate it, right? Or however the geek in you are passionate about it. Maybe you want to do all top 10. Maybe you're like, okay, what the hell? If they got top 10, what's top 20? Who knows? But this just gives you your starting point. So this talks about the challenging and the scoreboard, the exercise rules, if you want to do CTF. So the scoreboard was hitting, and it just walks you through this stuff. And as you go through, the different top 10, and then at the back, talks about the solutions. It gives you an idea, right? And even if you do okay, and there's multiple guys who are walking through this, and usually as we talk through walkthroughs in the past, everyone does things differently. And if you don't want to read this stuff, there's always a video on YouTube University. Okay, I'm gonna stop for now. I know Nick was putting stuff in the chat. Let me see.
Oh, the other thing I'll say too, honestly, if you can manage it, memorize the OWASP top 10, especially from this year. And the reason I say from this year is because they combined quite a bit from the 2017 even previous years into one finding now, which was actually awesome. It seems like they've taken a lot of input from security professionals or even feedback. But the 2021 controls that they have are absolutely phenomenal. And the one thing I do want to highlight, if you guys are in this industry and you do pen testing or web application pen testing, broken access control has been in the top 10 for quite some time. And to kind of, I guess, highlight what Otha and Mustafa had brought out, but the fields that are in there, that's why people point those out, is because that's like the first place it's the first place I go to, is I try and find the login pages, or I try and find any page that has an injectable parameter that's on there that I can play with and potentially break. And even if you can't necessarily break the web page, is it vulnerable to something like brute forcing, or can you use like Crowbar or Burp to inject a username and password from the latest breach, even to get past past the front gates, or even yourself. You can sign up for whatever website you're doing. Most sites are free to actually get that access because they want you as a customer, but you'd be very surprised what you can get. And even doing like a burp crawl or, Spiderfoot crawl or something else, what you'll see after you log in is quite substantial a lot of times too. So even more so, like, not that I wanted to harp on the automated stuff too, like you'll have to do that manual stuff too. And I would encourage everyone to get very familiar with at least being able to do, the OWASP top 10 manually, outside of having like a tool like NetSpark or a Zap, because it's going to make you a better pen tester, all in one.
And then just to piggyback off of what Nick was saying, I actually landed my web application security job by knowing the definitions and being able to speak on at least the top 5 during the 2017 time frame, and then being able to explain, just some of the basic stuff, how you would find something, what's your methodology for checking for cross-site scripting or SQL injection. So you definitely have to know that, like what Otha and Nick was saying, it'll definitely come in handy, because if an organization don't have that automated tool as of yet, like the Zap or the NetSparker, you can still go in there and find those things. And if you know how to do it manually, and they do have, Burp Sweep or NetSparker, it'll kind of make, your life a little bit easier. But just still being able to click through this stuff, you learn what those machines or what those automated tools, may just happen to miss.
And we definitely will touch on Burp Sweep and OWASP Zap. I didn't think about it, but we'll probably touch on that as well. NetSparker, all this stuff. But definitely, I started looking at the chat. Definitely a lot of good things. And let's say, for example, I think let's jump to this one. So this is about SANS, right? And SANS is probably one of the premier training organizations for cybersecurity. They cost an arm and a leg, but they pretty good training. But just to be able to say what are the errors included in the top 25 software errors, right? This is key, right? Even if you don't know all 25, just think about 1 or 2, right? Cross-site request forgery, I know that's like in the top 10. Here's the SQL injections. Even if you in your mind try to map them to what's in the OWASP top 10, that's probably a good thing to do. Improper input validation, right? We just got through talking about that. Information exposure. We just got through talking about that with broken access control, right? So this is very a good site, XML. This is also in the top 10 OWASP. And there's probably some more, but those are the ones that I just readily identify. So, and then they list resources to help eliminate. So this is even better, right? So something to go through, and you're like, well, this is a lot of work. That's the
Welcome
difference.
to pen testing.
Yeah, You know, it is a lot of work, but and like I said, we think about this stuff on TV, we see it, and we like we don't see the groundwork that these guys do, right? We just think they just get in and start hacking away, but it takes some. They have to have a core foundation.
Otha, I just to the whole group, I dumped in a YouTube link that is from David Bomball. I started watching this guy like about a year, maybe a year and a half back when he first started, but he had a talk with an ex-NSA hacker, Neil. If you guys know him, he's very big on LinkedIn.
After 5,000 pen.
Oops, somebody started it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring this up is I have never had an actual pen tester say what Neil did. And this was one of the best talks I have literally ever sat through. I watched the entire hour, and this was late yesterday at like 11 p.m. I sat through it for an hour. Not only does he go over like really good tools and the fact that you don't need to have the nice, bright, shiny tools. And, you know, I'm guilty of it too, like finding those cool, like, oh, I made a backpack RSA scanner or, you know, or RFID scanner. You don't really need a lot of that stuff. It's super simple. Like, everyone always thinks that pen testing is so complicated to get into, and that I could speak from my own experience running a red team. It's not. It's so much more simple and diluted that everyone, literally anyone that has interest in doing it or learning these skills can do it. But this was a really good talk because he actually said in here, he said to ignore even doing like some of the, you know, even to Otha's point, like the automated tools, and go back to the ground ruts and start going through and, you know, kind of hitting the ground and doing stuff even when it doesn't get found. But it was just overall a really good talk. It was a really good talk.
Yeah, I definitely will check this out as well. And I know you guys were like, well, when I leave here today, I was going to watch The Walking Dead because I was DVRing it. Nope, take your time and look at stuff like this. This is what you can binge watch, you know. So definitely good information. I'll check that out as well. 25 top software. This is, so we were talking about built with, and I guess there's a pay component on it. And so this is something that is done for free, Web Appalizer, right?
I think it's mostly free. I might be wrong. I know the extension for Wappalizer is 100% free. I think some of the stuff, like you can do some of the searches for free as well too. But I've had better response from Wappalizer than I have with Built With. Built With is pretty good too. Like, I don't want to kill it either. Yeah, Ernest, it's 100% okay to do robots.txt. So any just to make this very clear too, like anything that you can get as a normal browsing, you're not injecting and you're not putting code inside of a URI, perfectly okay to look at. Now, that does not necessarily mean that, hey, someone left something open and you're like, well, crap, I have a full list of their whole FTP suite that I can pull in and I can download directly from the external internet. You know, if you ever run across something where you're like, I'm not sure if I should be in here, notify that company, or at least, you know, do the due diligence to try and alert the company, or, you know, say, hey, I think there's something wrong here. Whether you think it's good or bad, I have always a tendency to just alert the company and just leave it be. But no, the robots.txt is definitely not. So to comment what Otha kind of led on, the robot.txt is kind of like where stuff can't come from. So if you're trying to go, like, for example, you're an external attacker and you're trying to hit a login page that is behind one other page that you have to click through, you can't go directly to that page. That's kind of like what you'll find in here. It'll also, like, you see the user agent star that says that it'll accept user agents for all of the stuff that's below for anything like CGI-bin or /eBay /ebooks. And if you look below where it says the Mozilla /3.01, it disallows kind of the same thing, but they might have other things that they've defined in here. Like they might see a Chromium, I don't know, like the latest flavor of Chromium from Burp. They might completely disallow everything from that Chromium, but I don't think they can, because I think it's the same as Chrome now. But this is where you'll actually get some pretty good, like this right here tells me that I need to look at every one of these pages. There's something on every one of these pages that I should be looking at. But yeah, robots.txt is a common one that you'll find.
Yeah, and shout out to Dave who gave an example. And as you see, it's just the domain name in robots.txt. You know, so it's not super secret to actually get to it. Some companies, from my understanding, they hide the robots.txt file as well, just because of
You
being.
can, but I've never found a significant. I've never found a significant finding from a robots.txt, to be honest. The one other thing here too that I want to make very clear: if you're using burp on a suite and you do not have permission to scan or search the, from that company to get to the robots.txt, then that is absolutely, not the right way of doing it. You're attacking the site with scanning. You shouldn't be doing that. So I do want to make the distinction there. Like if you do most normal sites where, www.whatever.com/robots.txt, that works like 99.9% of the time. But if you're using burp to find that, they hit it slightly like it's .com/x/robots.txt, and you use burp to find that, it's a definite gray area. I would avoid. You should not be active scanning anything, or I should say, services like Shodan. That's okay because you're not doing the deed, so to speak. You're just using the service to kind of get the data from there, and I'll leave it to you to, if that makes you feel unethically dirty. That's, to me, I see that as okay, because if someone's doing that, they should be blocking them. But just be careful with that distinction as well too.
Yeah. Here is another site for finding subdomains as well.
Yeah, this one I stumbled across. I forgot how I found this, and this one is actually really good. I found some very, very good subdomains from using this one, and as I found so far, there's no limit. Like it will literally just dump every domain, every subdomain to you. Whereas I think DNS Dumpster has like 100. It'll give you 100, and then it stops unless you have the paid version of it.
And this one, I forget who put this in the chat, but I think I've never seen it before, but it looks pretty cool. It has a different.
I threw this one in here too, so okay. I'm going to warn you with this too. If you start doing massive amounts of scan activity, this site is behind Akamai. So you remember how I told everyone that if you're requesting a site to do scanning activity for illicit or not good, not sanctioned things, if you get blocked on this site, you will get blocked on the CDN as well. And that's where I brought up the VPN. Yes, you want to hide your IP because you want to act as an attacker, but it's more because you want to continue to be able to do things offensively to where you do have legal, you're allowed to do it. So just be cautious. And this once again goes with, I forgot when I got blocked here, but I put too many, I asked it to do too many things, and it goes, well, hey, you're asking for a lot of information, and it blocked me. I couldn't get to the site until I threw on my VPN. So just once again, it's very, keep the OPSEC up, always use the VPNs, even when using these sites, because this site's protected by something that feeds into CDN threat feeds. So if for example, if you do something stupid to get blocked on Akamai will block you, period, because it goes, well, hey, you blocked me on here. And this is part of, what Akamai provides to the entire ecosystem. It looks at, not necessarily your company site, but every other site that it feeds, and it puts it into one giant list. So it's a very reliable source that, hey, this site got attacked by, IP 1.1.1.1. So I know it's bad. We shouldn't allow it on anything else. But you go on like the naughty boys list for like, 30 days or 45 days, whatever it is. And then you kind of drop off, but just be aware of that too. Like this is definitely it's a legit service. And some of the stuff is paid. I actually did pay to use some of the stuff. That's what unlocked me. But this is another good one too, because it hides you. It's not coming from your IP, and there's not necessarily a way, unless you're doing something, illegal, to where you can go back to nmapper.com and say, hey, who did this scan? And they give you the IP. But this is another good tool as well.
And then this one, the podcast. So this is something that Dave recommend.
I recommend it too. This podcast is awesome.
It's good. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
And so this kind of goes back to, there's so much stuff out there. So when someone that I know recommends something, then that gives me kind of a heads up to figure out, okay, I need to listen to it, right? Or I need to be involved with it, or I need to have a closer examination to it, because there's just so much stuff out there, right? And not to say something people are conning people, but some things are just a little bit better than others, as far as the information that they're giving. And so I want to make valuable use of my time. So I want to make sure I get that good information. I don't have to feed through a lot of stuff to figure out that one gem, although sometimes that's important. So definitely another podcast. And like I said, these sites we'll put in the note section when we post the video on online on YouTube. So anything else? Any questions? We're gonna call it wraps for tonight because it's almost 10 o'clock, and I want to make sure everyone gets out early to look at the NSA hacker video and to listen to this podcast because I know that's what you're chomping at the bit to do. Are there any more questions?